everybody. My name's Dan Fischer. I'm with the group Capitalism versus the Climate. We take direct action against the root causes of climate change. I want to read you parts of an article that I'm working on about the history of Bridgeport's environment and the global political context. I think this is important to share today because part of recovering and improving Bridgeport's environment is remembering and honoring the history of Bridgeport. So it's called Aroma of Flowers and Burning Trash. In 1854, a journalist named Ethiop visited Bridgeport's South End neighborhood and wrote a letter to the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass. The visitor reported, "Trees and air surround every house here." Remember, he's talking about Bridgeport South End. "The whole town is redolent with freshness. The emissions of aroma from the flowers beneath our windows and the chirp of insects contrast strangely enough with the effluvia and unnatural clutter of the business city." I want to go back a little bit further. This land used to belong to the indigenous Paugussett Nation, who lived here sustainably thousands of years, gathering shellfish from the Sound, planting corn, beans, and squash, gathering fruit, hickory nuts, and acorns, and hunting deer and other game. Well, the European settlers, after indirectly subjecting the Paugussets to a smallpox epidemic, directly occupied Paugussett land in 1639, watching the Europeans burn men, women, and children, Pequots alive. The peaceful Paugussett Nation gave up 99% of their land in just a few years after 1639. So something has happened since Ethiop visited Bridgeport. Now Bridgeport residents breathe in not the emissions of aroma from the flowers, but they breathe in the emissions from the trash-burning power plants and the gas and coal-burning power plants, the abandoned factories, the highways bringing automobile exhaust near people's homes. Forbes magazine ranked Bridgeport as the country's 4th dirtiest city in 2012. The American Lung Association gives this county an F rating. The television show Family Guy mocked Bridgeport as among the world leaders in abandoned buildings, shattered glass, and boarded up windows. Well, I want to argue that the city's pollution is a result from the U.S. systematically treating Bridgeport as an internal colony, exploiting these neighborhoods for the benefit of the 1%. It's no accident that Bridgeport gets stuck with the natural gas plant proposal, with the coal plant, with the trash-burning power plant. It's no accident that Bridgeport gets stuck being a guinea pig in the school privatization experiments. I mean, consider the company PSEG, operators of the Bridgeport coal plant, and the proposers of the new gas plant. PSEG buys its coal from Indonesia, the South Kalimantan province. This is a resource-rich country, a U.S. client state. From 1975 to 99, the U.S. enabled this country's genocidal occupation of East Timor, and Indonesia, returning the favor, opened up the area in 1991 to American and European oil companies. PSEG buys their coal from a company called Adaro, whose coal mining has displaced 2 entire villages and poisoned streams that 2 communities relied on, and so they can't even use this stream anymore for drinking and bathing. Some of these communities in Indonesia don't even get electricity, but they're sacrificed so that Westporters and Fairfielders can leave their multiple widescreen televisions and Xboxes and iPhone chargers and multiple refrigerators plugged in all day. And then PSEG burns this coal in Bridgeport's South End. Not in white and wealthy Fairfield or Westport, but in an area where 87% of the residents are people of color, where the income is just $11,400. The NAACP ranks this coal plant as one of the country's 10 worst in terms of environmental justice. And this, of course, is an insult to the legacy of the South End, which was Little Liberia when Ethiop visited, a neighborhood of free blacks and Paugussett Indians, a stop on the Underground Railroad, a prosperous fishing-based community, and the home of the historic Duncan Hotel. But people are talking about the coal plant, but not nearly enough about how PSEG wants to build a filthy methane gas plant right next door. If you don't think methane gas is dangerous, just ask the scientists at Cornell University, who say gas is worse than coal for the climate. Or ask the NASA scientists who say that methane is 105 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Or ask the residents of Middletown, Connecticut, who know that 6 workers lost their lives in 2010 because of a gas plant explosion. Or ask the families of the 8 people that died in a gas explosion in Harlem this spring. And don't listen to anyone who tells you that PSEG would be doing the environment or the climate a favor by switching from coal to gas. Anyone who tells you that is an environmental fraud, a climate fraud. And that includes Governor Dan Methane Malloy. And that includes Mayor Bill Fracking Finch. And that includes the Big Green Environmental Club sponsoring events like this that has taken millions of dollars from the billionaire Michael Methane Bloomberg. Now, consider Bhopal, India, the site of Union Carbide's deadly chemical plant explosion in 1984 that killed thousands of people and poisoned 500,000 others. This plant was producing chemicals for batteries consumed in the industrialized nations, but situated in the global south, the poorer nations, as this capitalist system typically demands. Well, the company's CEO at the time of the explosion was a man named Warren Anderson, who as of 2009 lived in Greenwich, Connecticut. And when he throws out his trash, it's trucked to Bridgeport and thrown into the Wheelabrator trash burning incinerator right across the street from the P.T. Barnum housing complex. And I went to that housing complex who's suffering the brunt of the impacts of this incinerator, such as cancer, lung damage, brain damage, and birth effects caused by trash incineration. And I spoke to a woman who lives there who had her hand on her young daughter's shoulder, and she said, her doctor said that we can't live here anymore. Her asthma is being triggered too badly by the air pollution. In 1990, Wheelabrator's Jim Doherty co-wrote a report revealing just how much the company cares about Bridgeport residents. The report says that burning trash in a non-willing community presents obstacles that are not necessarily insurmountable. That's how much he cares. Bridgeport residents are not necessarily insurmountable. Finally, consider Paul Vallis, the school privatizer who swoops into cities under shock and implements far-right education reform policies. In New Orleans, after Hurricane Katrina, he closed every one of the city's public schools and illegally fired some 7,500 school employees. Then Vallis sweeps into Haiti after the earthquake and implements far-right education policies there. And of course, his shock doctrine mission in Haiti followed a long tradition of U.S. oppression of Haitians, going back to the 1790s when the U.S. sent some $750,000 and troops to fight against the slave rebellion that eventually succeeded in 1804. Paul Vallis in Haiti cut costs by putting students in trailers tainted with a cancerous toxin, causing the students there to complain about headaches. And then, of course, as you know, Paul Vallis comes to Bridgeport and becomes a superintendent in Bridgeport, where he pushes for standardized tests instead of education tailored to student needs. He pushes for unregulated, unaccountable charter schools instead of accountable public schools. And with the help of our friend Michael Methane Bloomberg, who gave a $20,000 donation, he pushes for the abolition of democratic elections for the Board of Education. And the effects of Paul Vallis and the school privatization movement has been immeasurably bad for Bridgeport, and the impoverishment that it contributes to invites more pollution and more environmental exploitation in the future. And so that's why the resistance that is shown here today by all of you is so important to build an industrial yet ecological Bridgeport, an organized and yet horizontal Bridgeport, in a Bridgeport that would be a worthy successor to the Bridgeport that Ethiop described so beautifully to Frederick Douglass. Thank you.